She left me stranded 200 miles from home, thinking she'd humiliated me for good, but what she didn't know is that she lit the fire that would build my empire. This isn't just a story of betrayal, it's the rise of a man who turned heartbreak into power. The gas station in Billings, Montana, wasn't supposed to be the start of anything, just a pit stop for coffee and a bathroom break before the final stretch home to Denver. But as John Thompson stood there, watching the dust settle behind his wife Stephanie's sedan, he knew that nothing in his life would ever be the same again. Her sisters, Jessica and Vanessa, had been laughing as the car disappeared into the highway's horizon, not the laughter of confusion or nerves, but cruel, vindictive howls, the kind that clung to your skin long after the sound faded. John's hand still clutched the keys he'd pulled from his pocket, his house keys, not the car keys, not anymore. The October wind cut through his denim jacket, nipping at the sweat still drying on his neck. He stood motionless for a long moment, a statuesque figure in the fading Montana sun, with only the fluorescent hum of the gas station lights and the distant rumble of an 18-wheeler to fill the silence. And then, the crushing realization hit. He had been abandoned, not figuratively, not in a need-some-space way, literally. Stephanie, his wife of 8 years, had left him 200 miles from home with nothing but his wallet and phone. No vehicle, no explanation beyond that last infuriating command hurled out the car window. Figure it out yourself. The trip had been meant to be a simple weekend getaway. Stephanie's cousin was getting married, and it had seemed like a decent enough excuse to leave town for a few days. 4 people packed into Stephanie's sedan, herself, John, and her ever-present sisters. He should have known better. From the beginning, the trip felt wrong. The way Stephanie and her sisters exchanged glances in the rearview mirror, their conversations, stopping the moment he looked up. The hotel reservation was made in Stephanie's name only. The deliberate choice not to bring his truck, and the mocking jokes about spontaneity and lost masculinity, all of it added up, but he hadn't done the math. Not until now. He turned back toward the gas station. The warmth inside hit him like a wave, chasing away the worst of the Montana chill. A young man behind the counter looked up from his magazine. Need help? I need a way to get to Billings, John said, his voice low. The bus doesn't stop here. You'll have to call a taxi into town. Probably $60. John nodded. His stomach turned. $60 wasn't much in theory, but at that moment, it felt like a fine to pay for trusting the wrong person. 9 years earlier, he had met Stephanie at a job site in Fort Collins. She had been doing environmental consulting on a new commercial development. He was part of the structural crew from North Peak Engineering. She had this energy, sharp, focused, magnetic, the kind of person who made you feel like you were the only one in the room when she spoke to you. Her sisters, on the other hand, had always treated him like a guest, overstaying his welcome. Jessica, older and opinionated, never hesitated to vocalize how she felt Stephanie was compromising her potential. Vanessa, the youngest, masked her contempt behind fake smiles and passive jabs. Her words dipped in sarcasm. John tried. He really tried. He showed up for family dinners, endured inside jokes that excluded him, paid for vacations he wasn't invited to plan, fixed things around their apartments without being asked, and stayed silent when they mocked his blue-collar work ethic. They're just protective, Stephanie would say. They'll come around. They never did. Now sitting in the taxi toward Billings, John replayed everything in his mind. The forgotten anniversaries, the changed plans, the way his opinion never seemed to matter when Stephanie's sisters were involved, and the biggest red flag of all, how he had become a caricature in their private theater stage where he played the bumbling husband for their twisted entertainment. The Billings bus station was old, its paint peeling and linoleum floors stained from decades of foot traffic. The ticket to Denver wasn't cheap, and he had to shuffle funds around from 2 accounts just to cover it. The ride was 14 hours long, and each mile seemed to pull a thread loose in the fabric of his marriage. He stared at the dark shapes of Wyoming passing through the windows. No calls, no texts, no panic. By the time the bus pulled into Denver at 8:02 a.m., he'd made a decision. Not in a rage, not out of spite, but from a clarity that felt cold and clean. He hailed a cab home. The house was exactly as they'd left it. Mail piled up on the counter. Their weekend bags still sitting by the door, Stephanie's car conspicuously absent. He walked into the bedroom and sat on the edge of the bed. Then he opened her laptop. She'd never been cautious with her digital habits. Her browser was open, email and chats logged in. He didn't go digging like a jealous man. He went in like a detective looking for answers. And there they were. Group chats, screenshots, threads labeled Montana prank. The sisters joked about how long it would take John to make it back. Stephanie laughed. Jessica mocking. Vanessa giddy at the thought of John sleeping at a rest stop. It was like staring into a mirror and watching your reflection sneer back at you. He closed the laptop, packed a single duffel bag, left the lights on, doors unlocked, and walked away. Apartment in Colorado Springs was small, practical, and perfect. He didn't ask for an explanation when John showed up at his door late that night. He just handed him a beer and cleared off the futon. How long are you staying? Don't know yet. Kevin nodded, wordless, like he'd expected this day to come. On Monday, John called his supervisor and asked for a transfer to the Springs renovation project. By Wednesday, he was back in a hard hat, back in control of something even if it was just a concrete pour. Stephanie's calls started Thursday, straight to voicemail, then Jessica, then Vanessa, using burner numbers. He blocked each one, but they kept coming. "You're overreacting," one message said. It was just a joke. Another begged him to come home, to talk, to fix things. But none of them apologized. That weekend, Stephanie drove to Colorado Springs, parked outside Kevin's building, waited in her car. Kevin came home, saw her from the window. "She's outside," he said. John sighed. Went down to meet her in the lobby. "John, thank God," she said. "I've been worried." He stood still. "What do you want, Stephanie?" "I want us to talk. I want to fix this. You abandoned me. It was a prank. You're acting like we committed a crime." Her voice cracked, not with guilt, but frustration, as if his silence was more unforgivable than her cruelty. "You needed it," she said finally. "You're so dependent. We thought maybe you'd grow up a little." He didn't respond, just stepped into the elevator and pressed the button for Kevin's floor. As the doors closed, Stephanie's voice kept coming, muffled and desperate. John stared at the numbers, lighting up above the elevator door. He had no intention of going back. The Monday after Stephanie had shown up uninvited, John sat at Kevin's kitchen table, staring into a mug of burnt coffee. The silence between them was comfortable, the kind of quiet born of shared blood and mutual understanding. Kevin, as usual, said nothing until it mattered. "You think she's going to try again?" Kevin asked. John looked up slowly. "She already is." Texts from random numbers. Messages from Jessica. Yesterday, Vanessa even called North Peak, pretending to be a client. Kevin let out a low whistle. "You document it?" John nodded. "Screenshots, voicemail, backups, call logs, everything." Kevin got up, grabbed a box from the hall closet, and placed it on the table. Inside were papers, an old camcorder, and a manila envelope labeled Coleman Legal. "A friend of mine used her in a custody case. Says she's sharp, ruthless, if she needs to be." John raised an eyebrow. "You think I should get a lawyer?" Kevin's answer was immediate. "I think you should stop waiting for them to stop. They won't. Not until you make it legally impossible for them to touch you." The office of Patricia Coleman sat at the edge of downtown Colorado Springs. Clean, minimal, and modern. The waiting room was filled with the scent of lemon oil and justice. John sat across from her desk, his hands clasped. He didn't like lawyers, never had, but this woman didn't waste time. She took notes quickly, asked sharp questions, and never once looked at him like he was overreacting. "So, let me get this straight," she said. "Your wife and her sisters conspired to abandon you during a trip out of state, documented the event through text messages and social media, and have since launched a campaign of contact attempts and harassment." John nodded. "Yes? And you have physical evidence of all of this." He slid the USB across the desk. She plugged it into her computer and clicked through. The group chats, the photos, the videos. A slow smile crept across her lips. "We can work with this." That night, John sat on the apartment balcony, watching the city lights twinkle like scattered fireflies. He felt lighter than he had in weeks. Filing for divorce hadn't been part of his original plan, but neither had been left on the side of the road like discarded luggage. Inside, Kevin was cooking, some experimental chili recipe that smelled like freedom and too much cumin. John laughed quietly. His phone vibrated. Another unknown number. He answered this one. Just to be sure, Stephanie's voice came through, low and strained. "John, please. I'm scared. Jessica and Vanessa, they went too far. I didn't mean to hurt you." "Then why did you do it?" Silence. "I was trying to prove something," she said. "That you'd survive without me, that you'd learn something. But I think I lost more than I bargained for." "You didn't lose me, Stephanie. You gave me away." He ended the call and blocked the number. Weeks passed. The divorce papers were served. Patricia handled it all with mechanical precision. John returned to his routine: hard hats, dusty boots, steel beams, and something new. A night class on business management at the local community college. His idea, not a compromise, not a agenda, just him. That fall, he moved into a small rental on the edge of town. Clean, quiet. It was on a Wednesday night when everything changed again. John came home to find a note slipped under his door. No name, just a single sentence written in quick, panicked strokes. "You don't know the whole story." He scanned the street, empty, silent. The porch light buzzed overhead. Inside, he unfolded the paper again. I turned it over, nothing on the back. He sat on the edge of the couch, staring at the handwriting. It wasn't Stephanie's, it wasn't Jessica's either, but it felt familiar, too familiar. The next morning, another note arrived. This one inside his mailbox. "Check the brown envelope in the back of Stephanie's closet. You missed it." John drove back to the old house in Denver. It was risky. He didn't know if Stephanie was home, but curiosity on something deeper drove him. He parked 2 houses down, waited, no car in the driveway. He used the hidden key. He knew she hadn't moved and slipped inside. The house smelled the same, lilac and wood polish, but it felt empty, like the air had been sucked out. In the bedroom, he opened the closet. Boxers, old coats, a pile of untouched laundry, and in the very back, wedged behind a plastic tub of winter clothes, was a thin brown envelope. He opened it. Inside were photographs, dozens. Stephanie with another man, dates scrawled on the back in Vanessa's handwriting, hotel receipts, a second burner phone. There were also letters, printed emails between Jessica and Vanessa. One line stood out. Once she leaves him, she'll be free, and so will the money. John staggered backward, gripping the doorframe for balance. This wasn't just cruelty. It was a premeditated erasure. Stephanie hadn't just wanted to humiliate him, she wanted to cut him out of her life, of their shared assets, of the narrative. He took photos of everything, every document, every receipt, then put it all back exactly where he found it. On the way back to Colorado Springs, he stopped at a red light and stared at his own reflection in the rear view mirror. He didn't see a victim anymore. He saw someone who had just found his leverage. Patricia's eyes flicked between the printed emails and the screenshots on her desk. Her fingers tapped thoughtfully against the arm of her chair. They were going to move money without your knowledge, she said. Joint accounts, everything was in both our names. Not anymore, I guarantee it. They've probably already opened separate accounts. John exhaled slowly. Can we stop it? She nodded. If we file an emergency injunction today, we can freeze any remaining shared assets. But that's not all. With these photos, this burner phone, and the emails, we can establish fraud, intent, and financial manipulation. This isn't just a divorce anymore, John. It's a war. John didn't flinch. Let's fight it. The emergency injunction was filed. The next morning, the judge approved it within hours. All joint accounts were frozen, and a forensic accountant was brought in. Within a week, they uncovered multiple suspicious transfers to shell accounts registered under Jessica's Marketing, LLC, and a business consultancy listed under Vanessa's name. Patricia built the case methodically. Emails, bank records, screenshots. The documentation painted a picture of calculated financial siphoning and psychological abuse. The legal firestorm started burning quickly. Stephanie's lawyer, the same sharp-dressed man from the initial hearing, tried to pivot. I tried to settle quietly. Patricia refused. Meanwhile, John began compiling his own file, the emotional ledger. Notes from Kevin, timelines, personal testimony. Marcus wrote a letter describing what he'd witnessed at the wedding years ago. John's former supervisor at North Peak wrote another, detailing Stephanie's harassment through fake client calls. Every layer peeled back revealed more rot. And then the unexpected happened. A woman named Allison reached out through Patricia. She says she dated the same man from the photo Stephanie's mystery affair, and she has records. John texts, voicemails. She didn't know he was involved with Stephanie until recently. Allison handed over recordings of conversations that made John's stomach turn. Stephanie had promised her a future, had told her she was divorcing John because he was abusive, the same lie she'd told everyone else. One recording stood out. Once it's finalized, the settlement will take care of us. Just be patient. The next court hearing was different. The judge, now fully briefed, looked at the stack of evidence. Patricia placed on the table with weary eyes. Ms. Coleman, what are you asking for now? Immediate dissolution of marriage, Your Honor, under grounds of fraud, coercion, and reputational damage. My client requests sole possession of their shared residence, full access to his business assets, and a restraining order against Stephanie Thompson and both her sisters. The judge turned to Stephanie's attorney. Do you have a rebuttal? He opened his mouth. I closed it. Looked at Stephanie, who looked back at him with vacant eyes. No, Your Honor. Bang of the gavel. Motion granted. Divorce is final as of this hearing. Stephanie tried to speak. The judge raised a hand. This courtroom has heard enough from you, Mrs. Thompson. You may step down. Patricia turned to John. It's over. Legally, emotionally, financially, it's over. John said nothing. Didn't need to. The next morning, John stood in front of the building that housed Thompson Contracting. His logo now hung proudly above the glass doors. Kevin and Marcus stood beside him. How does it feel? Marcus asked. John smiled. Like we built something real. Inside, the phones were ringing. Projects were stacking up. Clients were recommending them. Integrity had become their business model and it was thriving. Outside, the fall wind cut sharp and clean through the Colorado air. John walked to his truck, leaned against it, and watched the leaves scatter in the breeze. There would be more battles in life, that was certain. But this one, this war of deceit, betrayal, and reclamation was one. And John hadn't just survived. He had rebuilt. The snow began falling the day John signed the final settlement papers. It was gentle at first, dusting across the rooftops, but it felt symbolic. A clearing. A season ending. He stepped out of Patricia Coleman's office with a folder under his arm, and no weight left on his chest. Stephanie's appeals had failed. Her attempt to spin public sympathy fizzled as the truth spread through their old social circles. Jessica's employer, once proud of her aggressive marketing skills, put her on indefinite leave after John's legal team submitted documentation of her involvement in the financial fraud. Vanessa, who had once bragged about being the free spirit, had her fledgling consultancy audited. Every thread the sisters had tried to pull ended up unraveling around them. John didn't celebrate. He didn't need to. Some victories are quiet, felt deep in the bones rather than shouted aloud. In the following months, John settled into a rhythm. Thompson Contracting took on its biggest job yet, a multi-unit residential complex on the north end of Colorado Springs. Kevin was now lead foreman. Marcus oversaw procurement. A couple of newer guys joined the crew, handpicked for honesty and grit. A night, John continued taking classes: accounting, marketing, business law. He was building not just a company, but a future that didn't rely on anyone else's approval. A life that didn't bend around someone else's insecurities. One evening, after a long day at the site, he sat on his porch nursing a beer and watching the sun dip below the Rockies. His phone buzzed. An unknown number again. He almost ignored it. Almost he picked up. Hello. There was silence for a moment, then a voice, soft, familiar. It's Allison. He sat up. Everything okay? I thought you should know. That man, Stephanie, was seeing the one I told Patricia about. He's been contacting me again. He's saying things that make me think the sisters might be planning something. John's pulse steadied. He was calm now, trained by months of betrayal and recovery. Planning what? He said. Stephanie's desperate. That she blames you for everything, losing her job, her friends, even her reputation. He said she might try something public. Embarrassing. John thanked her and ended the call. Then, without hesitating, he reached out to Patricia. The response was immediate. We'll issue a cease and desist to all parties. I'll also contact the DA's office to prepare for any slander or false accusations. But no public stunt came. Instead, Stephanie disappeared from view. Rumors trickled in. She moved out of Denver, cut ties with several friends. Her social media went dark. Vanessa was seen in a local diner working tables under a different name. Jessica's LinkedIn listed her as freelance consultant, though no one could say who had hired her. And John kept rising. By summer, Thompson Contracting broke ground on its first self-developed property of affordable housing units, funded partly by a local development grant John had applied for on a whim. The day the ribbon was cut, a small crowd gathered, local press, a few politicians, the mayor. John gave a brief speech about resilience, about how communities are built like homes on solid ground, by honest hands. Afterward, a woman from the city planning office approached him, tall, sharp-eyed, with a handshake that lingered. I've heard a lot about you, Mr. Thompson. I'd love to talk about future projects. Her name was Rachel. They talked for hours. A year passed. Then too. John no longer thought about the gas station in Montana. Every day he no longer flinched at unfamiliar numbers or guarded his conversations. He had healed in places he didn't even know had been hurt. One day, driving past a familiar intersection in Denver, he saw her. Stephanie standing outside a coffee shop, wearing a coat too thin for the season, her face pale and drawn. She looked up. Their eyes met. She didn't smile. Neither did he. He drove on. The story wasn't about vengeance. Not really. It was about recovery, about rediscovery, about learning that sometimes the people who break you are doing you a favor, exposing the cracks that needed to be fixed, the weaknesses you never admitted to yourself. John didn't need revenge. He had peace, and in a world full of betrayal, that was the rarest victory of all.